Welcome to the Stoicism Reframed podcast. This is episode number 5. Thank you for coming along for the journey. Hopefully you're finding it useful and hopefully you get a lot of value out of today's podcast. My name is George Rudge.
And I am Aaron Savage. Welcome to the show, guys.
Fantastic. How are you, Aaron, today?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's an early morning start, feeling fresh. Looking forward to having this little bit of a chat. What about you? You good?
Yeah, feeling good. Yeah, bit of an early morning, but I feel like it's kicking the day off in the right way, so
Definitely.
Let's get into it.
That leads us on nicely onto the topic that you wanted to talk about today. So hit me with a quote.
Oh, look at that for a segue. Unbelievable. So the quote today is from not a traditional Stoic, so you'll have to bear with me, but I'll get into why I've chosen it. But the quote today is by Viktor Frankl, and the quote is, "What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him."
Whew.
So Aaron, initial thoughts?
I think this is one of those quotes where, for me, it's not necessarily clear 100% straight off the bat from reading it or listening to it. Obviously there is, okay, well, you need a goal. Okay, that's good to know. But I think you really need to kind of think about it, give a little bit of time to understand what it means to you. So it's not one that I'm necessarily super duper familiar with. I have obviously heard it around, but that's where I stand on it. What about you? Why did you pick it for this week's show? What do you like about it?
I think it's obviously different to sort of the other Stoics that we've brought up, as I sort of mentioned. But I think it puts it in perspective that you have to be working towards something. And we can go into a little bit around of the background of Viktor Frankl and like his work and sort of where all that came from, because I think that provides some real sort of valuable context to sort of that quote, and it puts it in real focus, like that a man in his situation could actually have the mindset that he did.
Okay, that's really interesting, because I don't really know a lot about Viktor Frankl. I know where the quote comes from. I know his book. I've never read it. It's on my to-do list. It's been on my to-do list for quite a long time. But I don't know that much about him. So can you tell me a little bit and tell the listeners a little bit, if they're not familiar with him as well, to educate us a bit? Because I genuinely have no real knowledge about that background that you kind of mentioned.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, good place to start. Let's start there. So Viktor Frankl, he is famed for writing a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And this is, you've probably seen it on 100 recommended book lists. It's a bit of an all-time classic. But the real unique thing about Viktor Frankl is that he actually formulated his plans for this book whilst in a concentration camp. So whilst in Auschwitz in World War II.
Okay, I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, so the first sort of half, the book's sort of split in two. The first half of the book is his experiences within the concentration camp, which you can imagine is not a light read. This is probably not one to do before bed.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be really deep, which I like. But as you say, it feels like it would be one that you need to properly kind of sit down and give a bit of time to, and kind of ingrain what he's saying, rather than just take it surface level, as you say, before bed.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could almost be in danger of reading it like it's something almost like a made up, like a novel, but it's most definitely not. And it's a genuine recounting of his experiences in probably the toughest situation anyone's ever been put in. And then from that, the sort of the second half of the book goes into his sort of area that he developed, if you like, within sort of psychology and I guess philosophy to some extent, or maybe to a more extent, called logotherapy. So he actually created a whole sort of field of study after his times in the concentration camp from what he's learnt within there. And now that sort of segues us, I guess, nicely into sort of what all of that actually means. And I mean, logotherapy sort of had the key underlying principle that it's not a case of searching for, what would you say? So, for example, like Freud had his hierarchy of needs. It's not a case of searching for needs within life, but it's about searching for your why. It's about searching for your reason to actually pursue things. So logotherapy is very much around helping people find that within their lives and sort of reframe the situations they're in. So, yeah, quite in line with our podcast name, actually.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like we've introduced the podcast name and you've brought a quote to match it. Good work. No, that's really cool. It's really interesting to know as well, because I genuinely didn't know most of that. As I say, apart from his book, that was kind of the level of knowledge that I had on him, and it's probably quite poor for someone not to know that, I assume. But no, it's really cool. Good quote, man. Thank you. So how does that kind of link in with today's topic? What are we talking about today? Tell the people who are listening.
So I think picking that quote, I had a couple of things in mind. So we can get into a little bit of sort of your overarching why and sort of why that's important, and look at some examples of people that genuinely have big things in their life they're trying to achieve and sort of the effect that has. But without making that sound too fluffy as well. So like, this is important to me, you, and everyone listening, not just sort of the people out there really trying to move the needle on things. And then I guess tied into that, I was sort of thinking maybe we could touch on some goal setting aspects as well, because I know that's something me and you have played with quite a lot in the past, and probably still do. So yeah, potentially something we can cover there.
Yeah, awesome, man. Sounds good to me. And it's quite cool because there's also quite a lot of the Stoics talk about, you know, goal setting. It, to some extent, not obviously in those terms. It wasn't necessarily called goal setting back in the day. But yeah, I think that's can link very nicely to Stoicism. We can pull some knowledge from some of the other greats of our time as well, and see what they're saying.
Perfect. I mean, if you got anything sort of initial, I guess where I'd probably fall over on this is actually on that Stoic aspect. So it'd probably be good to be here, your thoughts on that, really, mate. Like to see what you've sort of dug out from older Stoics and more traditional Stoics, should we say?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think one thing that comes to mind almost immediately is a quote from Epictetus, and he says, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" And I quite like that, because it's very easy to kind of fall into comfort, to set a goal but not really have any like mini goals in between to actually help you get to where you want to be. And it kind of just makes you think a little bit more about, well, that's a good point. How long am I going to wait before I do achieve what I've said that I want to achieve? Like what we said last week with Memento Mori, we all sit here, or not all, but a lot of people sit there and say that, oh, when I retire, then I'm going to live the life I've always wanted to lead. Well, this quote kind of links nicely into that as well, but you might not get to that point. So how long are you going to wait? You could start right now. Like, let's do this right at this moment in time. Let's set some goals, which is how I then interpret that. And let's get to where I want to be. Let's focus on what I want to be doing. How am I going to get there? You know, let's go. That kind of thing.
Yeah, so I guess that links, like I say, quite nicely to that, almost that tensionless state piece in that original quote from Viktor Frankl. And do correct me if I'm wrong, but you're sort of alluding there to why are you sitting around? Why are you in this tensionless state? Why don't you sort of go after it and start moving towards where you want to be?
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I think that's it's a good synergy between the two quotes as well, and it just kind of shows that way of thinking it is through loads of different time periods. Like, so many people have identified that there is a need for that way of thinking, and I guess it's no surprise that they're the people that we then remember and that we're talking about today, even when those people have passed away. So they've clearly set a goal for themselves and they
Yeah.
achieved it, and now we're all sitting here talking about them and what they did. Maybe it's time for us to also do the same, and hopefully we can have even a smidge of impact as what those people have had in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's probably definitely easier for us to have an impact these days, mate. Imagine trying to have an impact God knows how long ago. But imagine without the internet, what happened?
Yeah, you couldn't just do a
Who knows?
podcast, could you?
You could not. No, you had to go and shout in the street.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. That's where stoicism comes from, isn't it? At the end of the day, people should standing on the corner of a street just talking to people. So yeah, mate, it's
Yeah.
interesting. I like it. I think we should. It's cool to get into the weeds of it a little bit more as well, maybe of that goal setting. How we necessarily do it, and again, I can throw in a few more stoic quotes into the mix as well to kind of help with that alignment too.
Yeah.
If you're up for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what might be worth sort of us digging into a little bit more. I know we'd sort of dug into the initial bit around obviously not wanting to be in sort of that quote unquote tensionless state, or sort of sat around and when are you going to demand the best from yourself. But I guess I'd be interested to know your thoughts around what you see as actually demanding your best, like that latter half of the quote, or for example for Viktor Frankl, actually what is a goal worthy of him. I guess what I'm asking there is, how do you necessarily identify what that is, rather than just it being like an ethereal, oh yeah, do the best for yourself. But like, what I guess what I'm interested in is like, right, well, what is that?
Oh, that's a question. That is a question.
I appreciate, yeah, that's probably more of a you probably need to write a doctorate or something in response to that. What I basically asked you, mate, is what is the meaning of life?
Yeah, definitely. It's 8 o'clock in the morning and you've just thrown one of the biggest questions that a man has ever tried to answer. Okay, well, I'll give it a punt. Why not? So what I take from that, and I guess, again, I can link this a little bit to Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius this time, where he talks about having goals. Like, I believe he was a wrestler, or he practiced wrestling back in his day, and that was like one of his goals. But he kind of said about, yes, you can have goals that work towards those types of things, like being better at sport, being better at your job, making more money, all those types of things. But what's actually more important is to be a better citizen, a better person, helping people more, like a better forgiver at faults, he says. So, I mean, for me, I kind of take that element, like the best of yourself, similarly to what Marcus Aurelius does, in the sense of, as much as it's good to work towards something where you're going to get something out of it potentially, what's probably more important is to just be a better person.
Okay.
Which is a little bit interesting. It's a little bit, I don't know, controversial. We may disagree on that. But I think at the end of the day, for the Stoics especially, it was about being the best person that you can be to help society, to help everyone as a whole, not just necessarily being and achieving things for yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't have asked for anything better for an answer to that question, mate. What you've done there nicely is completely changed the way I was thinking about this.
Okay, so how did you think about it then? Because that's good to talk about.
So I guess innately I was almost thinking about, to some extent, almost materialistic things, or the things that I could actually bring into my life that I necessarily wanted, or all those normal things, and less about how I can potentially improve my the value I'm sort of giving to society, I guess, is a way of summarizing that, and also my character, sort of as you allude to there. But like you say, that was sort of the Stoics' key focus. Like their main goals in life were to be better Stoics. So yeah, love that, and I think you're going to have me sat here now for the next couple of minutes, sort of reframing how I'm sort of coming at this.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are also human, you know, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like all of my goals that I've got listed out in front of me are all about being a better person and adding additional things to society, because they're not. Like, I've got things that I want to achieve in my life. I've got things that I want to be doing, and let's say even holidays that I want to go on, or things like that aren't for society as a whole. I mean, I'm sure society's not going to sit there and go, well done, mate, you've gone on 3 holidays this year. Good for you. Thanks for doing that. But there's a mixture, and at the end of the day, we are going to have things that we want to do for ourselves as well. And I think that the bigger thing is just making sure that a chunk of your goals are related to just helping people and being better people in ourselves, because you know me, I've always been quite a big proponent of, you know, self-development and learning more than what I know. So in doing that, hopefully as well, that, you know, I can then add value to society to help other people out. And like was this podcast, if we can add value to people, that is kind of doing that whole thing as well, you know, of being better people and helping society as a whole.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point there. Like, everything isn't necessarily going to be external, but I think having an external sort of portion to your goals, whether that be to help more people or whatever it may be, is really valuable, because I think having a goal bigger than yourself innately sort of drives you to achieve it that little bit harder. But I think the most important thing you can actually establish is what is most important to you, and like, there's no dressing that up. Like, if you are very sort of, I guess, materialistically driven and that sort of thing, in theory, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's probably not the most I think it may be trickier for you to, I guess, be happier and more fulfilled within what you want, purely because you're probably going to be chasing the next goalpost, even when you achieve those goals. But there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And if that's what really sort of makes you happy and gets you going, no problems at all. I guess that brings us nicely on to actually establishing, okay, well, what is that why? What is that why to you? But I think before that, I've got another quote to wheel out, if that's all right.
Yeah, mate, we love a quote on this show. Give us another one. The listeners can't wait.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I can hear everyone waiting. So this is actually one that is mentioned in Viktor Frankl's book as well. So it's a nice one. It's from Friedrich Nietzsche. So I don't know if you're familiar with any of Nietzsche's work. To be honest, I haven't read into it a great deal, but it's definitely something I want to get into a little bit more. But his quote is, "He who has a why to live for..." Let's try that again, shall we, listeners? "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." Now, it wouldn't surprise me if you heard that before, but it links in nicely to sort of what we're talking about. And just to sort of go full circle with this, back to that original quote in Viktor Frankl, like, can you just imagine the why that he must have had to be able to almost maintain his state of mind with everything that was going on around him in a concentration camp?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's something that we would never have, hopefully, any idea of what that's like to be in that position that he was in. So it just goes to show how much, as you say, that why is so important. Because if you can get through that and then do all the things that he did, wow, it is seriously impressive.
Yeah.
Seriously impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the key takeaway is, like, don't get me wrong, he was obviously unbelievably mentally strong. And he even mentions people that he could see sort of giving up on life, like, while they were in there. But he did say, like, the people who had something to live for wanted to live, wanted to persevere through whatever circumstances it was. But I think the key thing is, like, he's not superhuman, or he wasn't superhuman in his capacity for this. Like, this is an innate driver of humanity, if you like. So, like, within everyone, if you can identify your actual why, like the thing that you really deep down want to sort of achieve and move towards, and whatever that may be, you will get out of bed to make it happen. You will do the things that are uncomfortable, that are in your way, and you will just continue to progress towards that goal. So again, that's sort of similar to last week. I think is fantastic for providing clarity, and, like I say, moving towards actually what you want to do.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something to think about. Definitely something to think about.
Perfect. So I think we've spoken about that a fair amount. I absolutely recommend the book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, to anyone. It's quite a short read. Like I say, it's sort of in 2 sections, but it is really one to sit down, give some proper thought to, and let it sink in. It's one of those books you can probably revisit every 6 months to a year, just to help you. Almost, I guess, reading it does help you appreciate things a little bit more as well, like we spoke about last week, just because it puts your current situation in comparison to what was obviously a very dire situation. But I think now would be an opportune time to actually give some proper value to people, and hopefully go through sort of what we've done in the past as far as sort of goal setting and things is concerned. So if I can sort of bat that over to you, Aaron, like, how do you sort of tend to go through goal setting and those sorts of things?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give my top 2 things that I do. One for me is I like having, when I've set a goal, physical reminders around. So whether that is like my desktop, my phone lock screen, whatever it is, I'll kind of either make the list and have it somewhere that is easily accessible all the time, so that every time I go on something like that, I can see it. That's something that I personally find quite helpful. And then another thing, I guess it's not necessarily specific for goal setting, but it kind of is at the same time, is more when I'm struggling at progress towards a goal, is zooming out and kind of going, what would this look like if it was easy? So if I had to do just one thing, the next step to get to any closer to that goal that I'd set, what would it look like? What's the easiest way to do it? And that kind of takes the fear out of it. It takes the struggle and the pressure off of it. Like, even for us, for example, when it's come to running social media pages for our business, it's quite daunting to sit there and be like, oh, I've got to post so much content, I've got to get so much out there, blah, 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 I've got to get loads of followers. Well, slow down. What would it look like if it was easy? One post. Get the first one out. Do the same again tomorrow. One post. That's how I kind of see goal setting, and also just breaking down the processes in between those goals. What about you?
Okay, yeah. That's really interesting. So almost literally just like, what is thinking, like, sorry, just thinking to yourself, like, what is the easiest next step that will move me closer to that? Is that sort of where you...
Yeah, because it can be a lot of pressure, I find, if you're setting a goal. And I think with goal setting, they need to be big goals. Like, if you do too small of a goal, you don't necessarily have the motivation to get there. If it's a bigger goal, then you've got that drive, that ambition, that push to really do it. But it can also be a little bit daunting of how the hell am I going to get there from where I am now?
Yeah.
Well, what's the next step? What's just one little step? That's all you need to focus on right now.
And I think linking back to what we discussed, that will help massively as far as feeling like, right, well, I've done what I need to do today to get me close to that goal. So you get that piece of fulfillment there as well.
Exactly.
So you're likely to come back tomorrow and do that next piece. I guess sort of from my perspective, at the moment, I'll be honest, I haven't got clear enough goals in place. And that's definitely something I need to revisit. But when I do sort of set goals, it's something I've done a lot in the past and found incredibly useful. I sort of break it down a little bit. So I've got a fairly good understanding of sort of my why, if you like. So I've actually spent some real sort of dedicated time, sort of very highly caffeinated in a coffee shop, thinking about like the bigger questions. So I've sort of got a good understanding of that. And then I'll sort of, just to give you an idea of sort of the sort of things I was asking myself, it's like, okay, well, what sort of purpose do I want my sort of life to serve? And, you know, like, even like, what do I want to be remembered for? Like, why is that important to me? And like really delving into that. But I guess so once I've established my why, I then move into the actual goal piece. So being, right, okay, well, what links into that why? And then actual setting specific goals around that. I tend to use all the SMART format. So like,
yes,
time specific, measured, all those sorts of things. Just because I think that really focuses the mind.
I also do that as well. SMART goals. I think they're really, really useful.
Yeah, a little bit corny, but they are incredibly useful, aren't they?
But they're corny for a reason. They work. This is why businesses say that when you're doing your goals, like in a workplace, it's for that reason.
Yeah, focuses the mind. And then I guess the final sort of key piece, the only thing I'd add to that is I break that down into actual, I guess similarly to what you're talking about there, but like actionable steps. So, okay, right, well, I'm going to put in place some sort of KPIs, so some key performance indicators, whether that be post on Instagram once a day or whatever it may be. And that links back into the goal and then finally the why. So it's all sort of linked together. And I think if you go through that flow, you can actually draw a correlation between what you're doing on a day-to-day to actually your bigger meaning in life, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that idea of the fact that you've done like your why, and then that's how you've got then your goals, and that's how you get your KPIs. I do really like that. I think one point that kind of links into that topic as well that I found was quite useful when setting my goals was journaling. Okay. And I think this even may be something that we can talk about a little bit more detail in another show. But when journaling, it kind of helps you realise what is important. It gets your mind clearer as well. And if you, what I found, look back at what I was journaling, then you kind of realise there's a theme, which is essentially either your why or what your attention is on. And that's quite useful to sit there and go, okay, well, all my attention seems to be here. My goal was for this. Maybe align them. Or you can just pull out from what you've written down, as I say, what is important to you. And then you can develop your goals and obviously think about your why a little bit more detail from there as well. Go on.
So I guess that's interesting. So almost looking at the other way around, like look at where your attention goes, and maybe that's an indicator of what's sort of most important to you.
Yeah. Sometimes, even if it's, it can either show you what is important to you, or just generally show where your attention is. So if you've already got goals, you can see where the disconnect is, because you can see, well, this is where clearly my focus and attention is. This is where I wanted it to be. What do I need to do to kind of align the two together again? Some weird birds going on in your background there.
I was wondering if you'd be able to hear that. So there are birds currently, what sounds like in the chimney.
Like in your house, yeah. It's all right. It's a nice, peaceful sound as people are listening.
Yeah, soothing.
Exactly. But yeah, so that's kind of how I would not necessarily focus on finding your why, but it's just a little helper, a little bit of a tip that if you're struggling doing that, I always find journaling quite useful anyway. But it can have, aside from its normal benefits, a little bit of a side benefit of that aligning of goals, aligning of your mindset to where you want it to kind of be.
So journaling's definitely going to have its own episode, isn't it? I know we mentioned it last week as well. It's coming. It's coming. I think. But like you say, it's that perfect practical intersect of all these things you hear about, want to do, but journaling gives you the actual place and time to do that. So yeah, we'll definitely get one teed up, mate.
I think so as well.
I think just to sort of cast back a little bit, just to sort of go back to that piece around establishing why and sort of how that feeds in. I think when you look at people who don't necessarily achieve their goals or just set somewhat arbitrary goals, I think a huge portion of that is probably where they haven't done that initial piece, just establishing exactly why it's important and why you want to achieve it. And you might realize, well, actually, it's not something I really want to achieve, that piece. Actually, it's something that I guess social pressures or maybe family or friends or something like that, like maybe they actually want you to achieve that, but it's not something that you want to do. And to be able to actually identify that is hugely powerful. And you can try and bang your head against that wall all day long, but if it's not in line with that why piece in what you actually foresee for yourself, I think it makes it incredibly hard to achieve, if not nigh impossible. But on
100%.
Converse of that, I guess if you're in line with that why, it almost makes it easy.
Yeah, at the end of the day, there is some sort of saying, I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like a ship that has no idea where it's going doesn't care where the wind blows it. At the end of the day, if you don't know what your why is, it's something like that. It's probably not that wording, but it's like if you don't know where you want to be going to, what your why is, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter where you end up, because there's no kind of point of getting, or there's no point goal that you want to get to, you know? So kind of links in a little bit as well. And I think it's also just very important to realize that you can only focus on what you can control.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
and that's quite a big Stoic principle as well. It's like the four Stoic virtues in wisdom. That's one of the things that it speaks about, and that's one of the things that wisdom is kind of implying, is you can only do what's in your control. So kind of let go of that other stuff. What can you do to get you towards your goals? What can you do to move you forward, to get you that one step closer, blah, 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 blah. It's all very related. It's all very interconnected to, well, itself, and you can interpret it how you want to as well.
I think that is fantastic. I think perhaps something we've, I guess, neglected up till this point in the episode, but I think it's probably big enough and important enough that we should probably set that aside and do its own piece, just around, like say, having that control over how you actually interpret things and take them forward, which don't get me wrong, is a huge part of sort of logotherapy and sort of Viktor Frankl's philosophy and sort of the way that his approach was applied. But I think that's probably going to be best served wrapped up into its nice own 20-30 minute package where we can really get into that.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I think it's nice. We'll talk about it in more detail. But again, even as you reference, it all the people that we're talking about here, it all kind of intertwines within itself. There's this theme that runs through the ancient Stoics, from like Zeno and things like that, to Viktor Frankl, who, as you said, may not even necessarily be a stoic in quotes, but he can be considered somewhat stoic, and he has spoken things that are quite stoic. So yeah, there's a running theme throughout.
Yeah, and I think a nice thing you just sort of said there around, I guess extrapolating it a little bit further is like Stoicism isn't necessarily, all right, it's a school of thought in those sorts of things, but it doesn't mean that you're I wouldn't say me and you are, I guess, formal Stoics, if you like, but we just try to apply the Stoic principles within our lives, which is, I guess, the actual application of what they're talking about. So it's although he's not necessarily a traditional formal Stoic, I think you'd probably consider his mentality and his teachings fairly Stoic in nature. So it's rounds it off quite nicely. I think we've sort of delved into that quite nicely. There is sort of one other quote. I know we love a quote, and we're probably up to about 18 so far.
We're going to be 19 because I've got another one as well.
Oh, fantastic!
We got two coming up. Look at us.
I mean, I think mine's quite a nice one to finish on.
Okay.
Do you think this is an appropriate time for yours? If not, feel free to tee it up in whichever fashion you wish.
No, I do. I think the quote that I was going to say is from Epictetus, and he just says, "Progress is not achieved by luck or accident, but by working on yourself daily."
Oh, that links in fantastically to what we've been speaking about.
It does. So mine can fit in wherever, but it's just something, again, you got to work on it. It isn't just going to happen. Things just don't happen, unfortunately. Life would be so much easier if they did, but then we'd all be millionaires with helicopters, yachts, whatnot. You've got to work on things every single day. So that's what I want to leave people to think about. But now over to you for your final thoughts and your end quote.
Fantastic. So the quote I wanted to finish on, again mentioned by the great man Viktor Frankl. This is one of his. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. So it just links nicely back to everything we've discussed, back to that why. And if you can link that to the actual sort of day-to-day, what you're doing, why am I doing this action next? Why are we on this podcast together? That can take away any pain, any suffering that you sort of is in your way. And again, have a read of that book and you'll get a true idea of the context in which that's being said. And it just shows that it's an incredibly powerful tool that you can put in your toolbox.
Love that. Good way to end the show. Thank you for that. That's really nice to end with, and I say to just kind of think about, ponder on for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Hopefully we can sort of take that through the day. And the lovely people listening, hopefully you can sort of take something away from this. And if you listen to it first thing, like the time we're recording this, hopefully it carries you through your day and it gives you something to mull over. And maybe you have a bit of a thought around what is that why and are you moving towards it? But if you found this podcast useful, me and Aaron would absolutely love it if you would give it a like, subscribe, comment, share, whatever you can on sort of on the format you listen to it. Not only will that sort of provide us inspiration and motivation to sort of carry on getting on here every week, talking to you and sort of hopefully sharing some things that you find useful, but it'll allow it to get to more people as well, which is ultimately the goal. Hopefully me and Aaron love doing these on a weekly basis, but hopefully you can actually get some real value from it. Anything else you want to sort of say before we wrap that up, Aaron?
No, not really. I think just a big thank you to those of you that are listening. Look forward to seeing you, I guess, next week. But yeah, do let us know what you think, and if there's anything that you wanna hear us talk about as well, because we are both still learning. We're both learning about Stoicism ourselves. So if there's anything that you want us to dive into, we can research it. We can come back, share our thoughts. It might help. So that's all I'd say. Thanks for listening, and have a good week, everyone.
Have a good one. See you next week.
Yeah, it kind of speaks volumes, doesn't it, for itself? Yeah, I can imagine being in that position, so at least having a why. Oh my God, God, it's
Just got my old man sneezing in the background.
Oh my God.
Right, sorry. It's just when we're getting quite deep there. All Aaron could hear through his headphones was my dad sneezing in the background. Oh dear. Right. I can't even remember where we got to.
Don't worry, I'm gonna cut that out.
All right.
Yeah.
That could be a blooper.
Oh my God.
Right.
Let me go from some. You just said about that. You said about the quote and that he obviously Viktor Frankl in the concentration camp. So yeah, I'll go from there again.
Okay.
Okay.
Just want cautious of how much time we've got left.
Yeah, we
Not a
don't have
great
long.
deal,
We've got
so
9 minutes.
We'll have to start getting on to tips, tricks, wrapping
Yeah,
up.
as soon as possible. Okay, 3, 2,